If you want to compare two different measures, for example unit sales versus revenue, then a really common visualization for doing that is the scatter chart. And scatter charts are really easy to build in Power BI. So let's take a look. Over here in my visualizations gallery, I can see there's an icon in here for the scatter chart. When I take this one out, I get the visual template. And if I make it a bit bigger here, you can see over here in the field well that I've got a whole bunch of different options that I can use to build my scatter chart. So we're going to try and build a unit sales versus revenue scatter chart. So first thing we're going to do is pick up our revenue, drop it in on our x-axis, and pick up our units and put it on our y-axis. Now this is something that we see quite often, and it's very common when people are first building these scatter charts. They just get a single bubble here in the middle. And that's because we're aggregating your total revenue and your total unit sales across all of your data. Typically, you'll want to see more details. To split this single bubble up, and to do that, we'll need to come over here and we'll use this details field at the top. So let's take our category of products and drop it over into the details field. And now you can see I get a bubble for each of the different categories that we have. So you can see urban categories got the highest revenue in units. Then the rural has got the next, and then the other two down here in the bottom. And I can keep adding more data into this to build up the scatter chart a bit further. So for example, let's take our manufacturer and drop it into the legends. And now you can see I get different coloured circles for each of the different manufacturers. So it's actually the Van Arsdale product in the urban category that's driving most of the revenue and unit sales. Compare this to the rural Natura, and they've got fairly high unit sales, but actually quite low revenue compared to the Van Arsdale ones. I can also add another measure to control the size of these bubbles. So let's take out sales variance and just drop it into the size. And now you can see that I've got different size bubbles depending on the variance of the values. And like most of the other charts, if I come over here to the formatting pane, I've got a whole load of formatting options that I can use to control the look and feel of this. Let's just make this a little bigger. So I could actually come down here and turn on category labels and turn them off so I can actually identify each of the bubbles. I can come down here and turn borders or stroke around each of the bubbles so that it makes them easier to identify. And that could be particularly useful when you've got lots of overlapping bubbles or spheres down here. And then I can come over here and change the individual colours for any of the sort of manufacturers that I want. Now there's one more thing that we can show you that's really useful, and that's right down here at the bottom of the field well, called the play axis. This allows us to animate a chart over time. So if we drag the year field into this column, you can see now that I've got a timeline along the bottom of the chart showing me each of the different years that's in my data. Currently we're looking at 2015 data, but if I click in a particular year, we'll animate the bubbles and move them around for those particular different time periods, and I can even hit the play button and it'll let it run through and animate over the various years. If I actually pause this here on 2005, I can actually look at the urban Van Arsdale category and see what it made over that time period. By clicking on the bubble, I get this trace showing me the previous periods for that bubble that I selected. And if I hold down Control click, I can select other bubbles and see their projections and traces as well. Let's hit the play again, and you'll see that the animation continues and that the trace lines stick around. So I can track right through to the end of my data where those bubbles are plotted on this chart showing me the revenues against units. So you can see that we had good and steady growth all the way through the early parts of 2005, and then it suddenly declined throughout the year and it reached its lowest point down here in 2015. So you can see scatter charts are a really good way of comparing these two different or even three different measures on your X, your Y and the size of your bubbles. but we can also check, track and animate it over time to get an idea of how that data is changing year over year as we animate through it.